This is a 1997 Honda Accord 4-cylinder, and a common problem with these cars is the front motor mount wears out. The vibration isolator. Engines vibrate, and the way they connect to the car needs to insulate the car from that vibration, or you'll feel it everywhere. And when the car shifts, the engine also has a torsion movement that the motor mount helps control. Once it brakes, the motor moves too much. So I'm going to turn the car on now and demonstrate how going back and forth between forward drive and reverse, the engine rocks back and forth, and the failed motor mount doesn't hold it in place very well. You'll see it very clearly in just a moment. Here's a picture of the new motor mount, and the problem is a crack develops in these rubber supports, eventually severs the connection completely, and as you saw when the engine was rocking back and forth, this is just flopping around. The way I'm going to do this is first remove this bracket, which requires 14mm socket, and then there's another bolt that goes through the motor mount and the bracket, which is, I think, is a 17mm bolt, the size socket that's necessary. Before I do that, I'll remove this plastic connector just to ensure we don't break it. Just a snap connection on either end. Be expensive to replace if we broke it, so let's not break it. Half-inch drive, 14mm long socket, keep it tight. The next bolt to take that bracket off is really impossible to properly film, but this is the best shot I can show you with the wrench on the bolt. It's a swivel 17mm socket, a short 3/8 extension, and a swivel header ratchet. It's kind of a combination of things to basically go around corners. So this takes a little bit of extra tools, but it's a tough area to work. And now I'll get that out. We'll move along to the motor mount itself after that. This is the wrench combination that I used. Basically, I got on at this funny angle, and the worst part was breaking it loose. It was kind of tight, but managed to do it without losing any fingers. And there's the bolt. The bracket's ready to come out now. Just lift it out, set it aside, and there's the motor mount. 3 17mm bolt heads, so a long extension with a 17mm socket. I'm going to use half-inch drive. They look pretty like they might be tight. I didn't have a half-inch drive extension that long, so I patched together 3 various lengths of half-inch extensions. Okay, looks like it'll be more than enough, and they are tight. I can hardly budge it. Okay, now I'll just take those off, and we'll be able to remove the motor mount, and I'll show you the broken spot. Here are the 3 bolts. That lifts right out. It's obviously broken right here. Could be worse. Doesn't even go all the way through. And this side isn't even cracked yet, but oh, it does go all the way through. It goes all the way through. So it's really floppy. That's not holding the engine from moving around as well as it should. So let's put the new one on. You can see how the old one just flops around. Doesn't do any good. I can move it with my finger. The new one, I can move it just a tiny bit. It's very rigid.
Go ahead.
The new one just sets into place. Line up the bolt holes. Bolts drop right in. You can tighten them most of the way, finger tight. Just using the socket extension combination to make it easier to screw these in by hand. This particular motor mount is from the dealership. I've done this procedure before and tried using aftermarket motor mounts. They're a little bit cheaper, maybe half the price. This one was in the $50 range from the Honda dealership. And they're 20 plus from local parts store. But the problem I had with the aftermarket motor mounts, and I tried them twice, is that the holes for the bolts didn't line up very well, and it's an awkward place to try and pry it about to make the holes line up for the bolts. And so it was worth it to me to buy the perfect fit from the dealership and not have to fight those awkward or misaligned bolt holes. Now that they bolt the finger tight, just give them a little crank with the wrench. They don't have to be excessively tight. That's it. Now we put the bracket on and run the bolt through the motor mount. The bracket has a nut built into it. The bolt is going to screw right into that nut, so that's the next step to get that bolt in place. It's an awkward place to work, but not impossible.
Go.
Okay, I'm trying to put the bolt through, line up the holes, the hole in the bracket with the hole in that motor mount, and there are hoses and pieces of plastic in the way. It's really, so they get it in together. The area is loaded with sharp pieces of sheet metal and sharp plastic fasteners and all kinds of horrible things that can badly cut you if you force the procedure faster than is practical. So you just have to slowly try different angles and places to squeeze your arm in until it works. And be careful not to cut yourself on things like this or these metal clips, because if your arm slips or your hand slips, they're quite deadly. Okay, so I have it in, finger tightening it. I'm not going to tighten it all the way until I have the other 3 bolts on the other side of the bracket in place. There are 3 bolts, 2 short ones and 1 long one. I don't really know exactly where they came out. In the order they came out, I wasn't paying attention when I took them out, but I assume the 2 short ones go on the top. You can see the place where this lower one goes in is deeper, so we're going to go with that, even though I'm not entirely positive. I'll just be careful that if it feels like the bolt is unusually bottoming out when I'm putting it in, I may rethink that strategy. But if it threads most of the way in without any resistance, I'll assume it's not poking through the block or creating any damage. Okay, I've switched to 3/8 drive because we're not dealing with any excessive tightness anymore, so you can use less bulky tools. Makes it easier to work in this area. I ran that lower bolt all the way in by hand, so I don't have any concerns about bottoming it out and breaking the engine block or anything like that, so I'm pretty sure it's in the right place. Now, tighten these, normal amount, nothing excessive. And before I put this plastic piece back on, I'm going to tighten the long bolt through the motor mount. This is an awkward place to work, but you can make it work one notch at a time. It's tightening it a very small amount each twist. I had it finger tight most of the way. Okay. Now just tighten it a little bit more. We'll call it a day at that right there. This metal bracket just holds the clip in place. It's a connector for the oxygen sensor. Now snap in place the other side. Push down a little bit on the release button to get it all the way on, and that's it. It's a completed project.